Welcome to episode 10 of the Shotgun Studio podcast. I'm really excited about this episode because there's a lot of gear that I want to talk about, mainly gear I purchased because of Black Friday. But if you guys do suffer from gear acquisition syndrome, just like myself, Black Friday can be really hard. It can be expensive, a budget buster, where I hope my wife doesn't find out about some of the stuff or all of the stuff I've gotten. So I've gotten my YouTube set up now to where I'm very comfortable with it. I've gotten a lot of stuff, what I would consider my dream setup. Not really, because my dream setup would be way more expensive, but where I'm at now in my YouTube journey, I'm pretty much got the stuff I want. So luckily, this was a good Black Friday. I know talking in the last episode about not buying cheap gear, kind of want to do a catch-22 on that one in this episode. So, but before we get into all of that, the microphone I'm using that you can see in front of me is the Neat King Bee 2. This is a great sounding mic, in my opinion. Let me know how you guys think the sound of it is. But the bad thing about it is the size. Like, it is ginormous. I have the Neat Worker Bee, the original one, and that's a smaller condenser microphone, and it is much smaller than this one. This one is so big and heavy that I cannot put it on a boom arm because they cannot support the weight of this thing. So I have to use it on a tabletop stand, which isn't always ideal, especially if you're going to be dropping stuff on the table or reviewing stuff. You might pick up some tabletop sound, but not really doing any of that right now. So figured it'd be a good time to bring it out. I originally bought this for my wife because she was thinking about getting into doing voiceovers and stuff. And I heard this was a great one, especially if you don't want to spend a lot of money, because I didn't know if she would actually do it or stay with it. I ended up getting this thing out the door for like $35 after like the sale and some like rewards points and stuff I had. So I'm like, well, $35 for this thing? Oh, got to go for it. So I really, really do like the sound of it. It's just that the downside is that the size and weight. It's really big. And if you have it in front of your face, like I do right now, you can't see me. So you kind of have to have it off to the side, which isn't bad because then it helps with the plosives as well. I need to do a separate review video on this thing because I do really like it. I have it going into the Rodecaster Pro 2, and I just have it on the general condenser setting. The only thing I've adjusted is I did put it on the podcast studio preset. Other than that, I have it at 27 decibels of gain, which is actually pretty low. I had the Lewitt LCT 240 Pro on here before I brought this one on, and the gain, I had to go way down on this microphone just because it has a bigger capsule. I'm not used to having such low gain, even on, the road. It's set at like 27. Usually it's anywhere from like 30, even up to 50 on some of those condenser microphones. And this one had to dial it down all the way down to 27. So goes to show you what the difference between a smaller and larger capsule will do as far as sound. So if you've watched any of my other episodes, you know that I have an addictive personality. If I get into something, especially like a hobby or an interest, I get into it all the way 100%. Like, I want everything and top of the line of everything. So obviously with the YouTube stuff, there's so much gear involved with it, and you can buy cheap stuff or the expensive stuff, and it's just crazy because even if you buy something, you end up upgrading it or getting it something different. And so that's a lot of costs involved, but it is fun. And then I also got into motorcycles like a little over a year ago. And so I have a whole separate channel for motorcycles now because I like filming that kind of content. It's kind of cool doing motovlogs just because they're different, and being out on the road and elements on a motorcycle, just really fun. But that's another thing that is an expensive hobby. Just buying the motorcycle is a huge investment. And then I unfortunately bought a Harley. So if you know anything about motorcycles or Harleys, the Harley Davidson stands for high dollar. And so not only are their bikes high dollar, but then the stock Harleys as they come just aren't, they're okay, but you have a lot of upgrades to do as far as like exhaust and just customizing the bike to you, which is great. But kind of like with this gear and stuff, it's expensive. Like, any part that you want for a motorcycle, it seems like it's anywhere from $300 to $500 minimum. And that's if you can install it yourself. And then if you can't, then you're paying labor, which Harley Davidson charges a ton of money for labor. But luckily, that's where YouTube University comes in handy. You can kind of learn how to do stuff yourself by watching videos. And yeah, it's just another expensive hobby that I got into. And that's kind of taken me away from doing a lot of stuff on this channel is during the spring and summer, because I'm out riding and doing all that stuff and spending my money on all that stuff. Whereas now that we're finally in the winter, not really riding season, I can come back and do more YouTube stuff, which it's funny because I've noticed I was really into the motorcycle stuff while I was riding, but now that I'm not, I'm back into the YouTube production stuff and gear and everything like that. So it's kind of like a never ending cycle of stuff. Probably the cheapest hobby I've ever gotten into is disc golf. But again, I wanted to buy all the discs and stuff like that. But luckily, playing disc golf is free, and the discs aren't that expensive. I think the most expensive one I bought was like $25 maybe. And really, you only need like a few discs. Of course, I have a whole bag full and only use like 3 or 4 of them, but you know. And then, of course, if you watch my main channel, our podcast, we talk about firearms, obviously with the stuff behind me, and then whiskey. So unfortunately, I got into whiskey, not only drinking and trying different stuff. We try a different whiskey on the podcast every week over there, but collecting whiskey. Like there's a whole thing with allocated whiskeys and collecting the hard to find stuff. And that, again, is expensive, or it can be. And it's just something else that's like, man, you gotta have everything for. So what I'm actually drinking now in front of me is just regular Buffalo Trace. That's one of my go-to, my favorites. It is kind of hard to find, but if I find it, I buy it because I just like to drink it. It's good. I might have had it last episode, but yeah. So between YouTube stuff and motorcycles, disc golf, and whiskey, kind of a lot of expensive hobbies. So I definitely need to get into something that doesn't take a lot of stuff to get into. Maybe I need to go back to disc golfing. But of course, it's winter time, so now I'm stuck in here doing this type of stuff. So going back to the last episode where I talked about not buying cheap gear, there's kind of a catch-22 with that, because if you know that you're going to be getting into YouTube, then investing in good stuff right away, you know, buy once, cry once kind of a thing. But then the catch-22 side is, you know, sometimes that's all you can afford, and there's nothing wrong with buying the cheap or budget-friendly gear, but also buying the cheap and budget-friendly gear kind of helps you in a way. Not only are you learning about, like, say, lighting and cameras and stuff like that, but then you kind of learn the workflow and then kind of where you're limited and where better gear would help you. So that's what I did when I started my main channel back up about 2 years ago now. I started doing a lot of research on lights. I knew nothing about lights, cameras, anything like that. Starting a podcast, got really deep into that and buying all the stuff. But I stuck to more budget-friendly stuff, or the cheaper stuff, because I wanted to learn about lighting and cameras and stuff before I bought the more expensive stuff, and just to make sure that, you know, this was going to be something that I continue. Now, 2 years, fast forward to now, obviously I am definitely invested in it because I have 3 channels now. I have the biggest channel, which is like 30, got over like coming up on 3,500 subscribers. Boomstick Tactical LLC, talk about whiskey and gun related content over there. I have this channel that is more gear and production type of stuff, and then the motorcycle channel, which recently started this summer, Rusted KC Moto. And that's, yeah, so running 3 YouTube channels. I know they always say don't do that, but I have obviously 3 different things that I'm really passionate about, and I wish you could just put it all on one channel, but you can't. So that's why I have the 3 different channels, but it's kind of fun mixing things up. Like, I know you want to be consistent and make all the videos for that niche, but I have 3 different type of hobbies really, and it is fun. Like, if I get sick of making videos on guns or, you know, motorcycle stuff, then I can come back and do the gear stuff. And so it's kind of a nice break in between each different things where I can come up with different stuff. And I'm obviously growing and learning new things in between each channels. And it's fun because the 2 channels obviously are mainly pretty much in this studio, but with the motorcycle content, that's a whole different type of recording and video setup really. So kind of learning how to do that stuff and work, you know, out in the elements and work, you're you're working with a bunch of wind noise and stuff. So trying to get good video and audio is actually really difficult on a motorcycle. So trying to take what I've learned from this channel and trying to make better motorcycle related stuff has been kind of fun and definitely a big learning process. But I keep digressing. So going back to the actual gear side of things, buying the cheaper, kind of budget friendly, less professional gear kind of helped me learn about all that stuff and where I needed to kind of focus things and how to make things better for my setup, because everybody's setup's different. You have the people that have their just like behind a computer kind of a thing, or you're moving around a lot, where I'm kind of like in this position right here. So my setup's a little bit different. And so trying to figure out what would work best for my setup between, the pain points that I had with my gear and then learn about how everybody else had their stuff set up. So I've really kind of glad I bought some of that cheaper budget friendly stuff to learn. And now that I know more, I kind of know what type of stuff I need to invest in. Because if I would have invested a lot, I might not have bought the right things or the right type of lights. And still, I would have had more professional style stuff, but it might not have been the right gear. So the last few months, I've been really researching what type of lighting and cameras and even a computer that I needed, because I was really limited on, especially like the lights and computer. The camera is a whole different story we'll talk about, but like with the lighting, I was originally using, if you see my studio tour video that I posted, I was using these LED, I think they were from Newer, LED light, barn door LED light panels. And they were okay, but I quickly realized that it's hard to get soft light from just the LED light panels. So I ended up finding like a couple different softbox lights, and I found ones that actually came with those grids that helped. But even with the LED light panels, it's hard to get like a consistent lighting, even with the soft boxes, because you still have that one center that if you're looking at the light, like you see it's all centered. There's a little bit of spill in the soft boxes, but nothing like actual dedicated LED cob lights, which I've recently kind of upgraded to. So going back several months again, I knew I wanted to update my lighting, and budget is a thing. So I was just going to update one light and kind of go from there. I wanted to see how those dedicated video lights, the cob lights, worked. So I didn't want to spend the $900+ on the Amarans and the Godoxes and all this stuff. So I found a really good brand, and I've been very well impressed with these. The GVM, the SD200D LED lights, and they've been awesome. They're these, what you typically see in YouTube studios, the cob lights. I do have two different soft boxes on them, but I originally just bought the one to see how it would change my lighting and kind of workflow. And I was so impressed with that one that over Black Friday, I bought a second one and completely replaced the barn door LED panel lights with these two lights. And I'm so glad I did. These things are way better. They're easier to work with, and I think they just give a better lighting overall. I am going to do a new studio tour of kind of everything I've upgraded, because the last video is pretty much outdated now. I have a lot of the new stuff that we're going to go over, but I'm waiting on a couple other things, and I want to wait until I get those things to do that video, so that way you can kind of see where I'm at and kind of all the cool stuff I got from the Black Friday thing. But yeah, I'm really glad I waited on the lights and kind of did a lot of research to see which ones would be good for this studio. So these are cool because they're not just daylights. They're technically, you could change the settings, so you can change them to warm to daylight. And they're the 200 watt, which for this room is a perfect wattage. I don't think they're above like 16%. So they are pretty low on brightness. And the cool thing about them is you can buy them as a kit. So they come with different soft boxes. So the first one I bought that came with a light stand and the lantern soft box, which is great because especially with this black wall behind me, it helps illuminate that a little bit more than if I would have just gone with a regular soft box. So when I got the other light and replaced those other ones. I ended up getting the bigger softbox and not the lantern. So that way I didn't have two lanterns. That would have been way too much light in the background. It does act as a nice secondary light. So the lantern would, I guess, be considered the key light. And then this other one would be the fill light. And then for a hair light, I don't have it right now. It finally just got shipped today. I have the Amaran T2C tube light that's coming. And it actually came with a free light grid on a Black Friday sale, because normally the light grid for it is like an extra $45, but because of the sale, that came for free. So I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to get that. So not only was the light on sale, but the $45 softbox kind of a thing came with it. So I'm actually going to hang that up above me and kind of use that as a hair light to kind of help separate me from the background. I'll probably match it to these lights around me, kind of that. I think these are at like 2800 Kelvin to get that kind of warmer light, whereas the main lights are about 56, maybe 5500 Kelvin. So trying to find like to get a good hair light for this setup was difficult, because yeah, it's easy to put the main, key and fill light at a 45-degree angle in front of me and have it come in this way. But trying to find a way to put up a hair light was kind of difficult in this setting. And I found a video, the fellow filmmaker kind of did a video on that hair light. And I'm like, hey, that's cool, because I can actually mount it up on the wall, this peg wall above me, and it'll come down on not only myself, but it's long enough, should hopefully be able to fill in the guests. I usually have like 2 to 3 people on the main podcast. So that should give us all a nice hair light. So that's something that's coming. So I want to get that set up, and then also a tripod that's coming. We'll talk about the camera thing here in a second. So, but a lot of cool stuff I'm really excited for. It's cleaning up my setup, making stuff way easier, and just, I think it's going to be better overall. And yeah, so that's the lighting. So, the first light I got on, there's always holiday sales. So I think I got that one on like, what was it? Like a Memorial Day or something sale. I always like to know what I want, but then wait to buy them until they go on sale. And the cool thing is, if B&H Photo, they actually have an education program. So you can actually get student discounts on stuff if you're a student. So I, like a couple years ago, thought about maybe going back to our JUCO over here and doing like photography stuff. So I signed up, got accepted, but I haven't actually done anything yet, but I still technically have a student email address. So all you need to do to be part of their education program with B&H Photo is have a student email address, and then you're part of their EDU program and can get actually some pretty good deals on a lot of the equipment. So that's actually been a real helpful thing, because it's like a decent discount on some stuff, especially if it's on sale, and then you get that student discount on top of it. That really helps. So if you're a student, whether it be in high school or some sort of college or whatever program, you can actually get that EDU discount. And as long as that student email is good, I think that account stays active. And then, of course, there's all those different Prime Day deals with Amazon and everything to keep a lookout. So whenever I decide on something I want, I wait and see what I obviously know what the price is retail. And then that way, when it goes on sale, I know if it's a good enough sale or not. Unlike some of the Black Friday stuff you hear about with like Walmart marking stuff down for Black Friday, but then it's actually really the same price. Or like online, sometimes they'll mark up the regular price and put it on sale, but you're really paying the original full price for stuff. So when you're actually doing research on gear that you want and maybe waiting to go on sale, kind of keep an eye on and kind of know where different places are at pricing wise. So then if you are actually getting a good deal. So that definitely helps. So I finally got the lights to where I want them. I'm really good with these lights. I think these are going to be the lights that I use for a long time. They weren't that expensive. I think full price, if you get the kit with the lantern softbox and the stand that it comes with, it's like $369. But each one I've gotten on sale for like, the first one I got on sale for like maybe like $249 or something like that. And then the second one actually got an even better sale because I had a trade-in credit with B&H Photo. So I ended up only paying like $100 for this other one, and then got the softbox on sale for like $80. I got the Aperture Dome like SC or something like that, which it's kind of a pain in the butt to put together, but it's not one of those that I'm going to be taking down and putting back up a lot. It's just going to stay there. So I didn't need to spend the extra money for the ones that are a little bit easier to set up and take down. Definitely recommend this one. And it came with the grid, which I don't have on it right now, but this is a very large softbox. It's significantly bigger than the lantern, which I thought the lantern was big compared to the other softboxes I had. But then I put up this SC dome light, and it's very big. If you have a small bedroom that you use for your videos, I don't know if this would fit. It does take up a lot of room. Luckily, this is an oversized room that I use as an office, so I have the space. But if you're in a tight area or using it like behind your desk and you're pretty close to the wall, the large aperture dome box might be a little too small. So maybe you need to go down to the mini. But I just think these lights do look way cooler set up than those barn door ones, because having to use those to set up a softbox with those barn door LED panels, they weren't originally made to be used with those, and they would always slide around and not stay centered, and it was just a pain in the butt, where these are made for these lights and they just stay locked into place, and it's awesome. So if you're looking to upgrade any of your gear, I definitely recommend lighting because that's really going to affect your quality of videos and really up your production. So lighting would probably be the first thing I would say to really put money in, especially even over a camera, because even iPhones right now, if you're using iPhones, you can get like the Blackmagic app and, control all your ISO and stuff like this and really dial it in. Because if you use just the general settings in the automatic settings in the camera of your iPhone, the white balance is always kind of changing and fluctuating, but you can actually set that now. I think just the actual camera app now has a cinematic thing to where you can add like a blurry background, which is kind of cool. I would definitely recommend upgrading your lighting to some good lighting, and then down the road to the camera if you're kind of torn between which one to upgrade first. So the next thing I got is actually the next things were all kind of Black Friday related deals. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and those were all kind of extended, so you got kind of a longer time frame for the deals. So I have been using the MacBook Air, the 2020 version with the M1 chip, just like the base model. It's got 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I think I upgraded to the 256 SSD on it. But other than that, pretty base model computer. And let me tell you, the MacBook Air, especially with that chip and RAM, is not a good one for video editing, especially 4K videos. Keeps to be getting slower and slower, and it crashes on me all the time. And then I was having an issue with it not wanting to upload or export the file to my SSD card, which I don't know what happened with that. So I was having a lot more issues and very limited on production side of stuff with even using Ecamm Live. For some reason, I was getting a huge delay with my camera. Like, I don't record to the SD cards in the cameras. I use Ecamm Live for every video, and it worked well for a long time. But then the last 6 months, I noticed there was like a really big lag in not only what I'm seeing in right now, like the preview window, but also the finished product. And it just seemed to get worse and worse. And I tried going through all the settings in my camera, changing out the cables and even the cam link that I use, and couldn't fix it. So then I'm like, okay, probably the computer. And I heard a lot of people saying that it's really hard to stream with that MacBook Air. You really need at least 16 gigabytes of RAM to do that. So I'm like, all right. So been having a lot of issues with editing. It takes a long time. It took, for a 41-minute podcast video, it took over an hour for it to export from Final Cut Pro, which isn't that big of a deal, but it is kind of a long time. And even the shorter videos took quite a while. And then just trying to edit, I always had to wait for the audio files to kind of catch up, the audio waves. And then again, it crashed on me a lot. I always get that little beach ball thing. And it got to the point to where it's like, okay, I have to do something because this is getting way too time consuming and not fun. So I knew with Black Friday coming up, computers were probably going to go on sale. So I started researching on what would be a good computer. My MacBook Air still works, and so I didn't want to get another laptop because I still like this one. It's nice and small, and I use it, for other stuff, and it still works. So That's one good thing about Apple computers is they tend to last longer than the PCs I've had. So I wanted to keep it. So I knew I didn't really want to go with another laptop. So also the MacBook Pros with the M2 or even M3 chips now, bare bones, you're looking at $2,000 just entry level. So I wanted to keep it under that, obviously. So that was the MacBook Pros were definitely out of the picture. But then I came across the Mac Minis, and I knew like the Mac Minis and then the Mac Studios. But then again, Mac Studios are pretty expensive too. So I initially saw that you can get the base model Mac Mini for like, it was like $599, but then there were some sales going on to where you can get it for $499. I'm like, heck, a base Mac Mini for $499? Like, that's a great deal. But then looking at the specs compared to my MacBook Air, they're pretty much the same, 8 gigabytes of RAM and all this stuff. So I'm like, I'd pretty much be spending $500 for the same computer. Yeah, you get some more ports, but performance-wise, it'd probably be about the same. So then started looking into the Mac Mini line and kind of settled after doing a bunch of research and seeing, pricing and everything. I settled on the Mac Mini, the M2 Pro chip. It's got the 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I think it's got the 512 gigabytes of SSD. I wasn't too worried about that because I edit all my stuff off external SSD cards anyway. So, but I think to get to where I wanted, I had to upgrade to that anyway. I could have gotten up to, like, I could have built that MacBook Mini out to like 32 gigabytes of RAM and all this crazy stuff, but then you're getting into like Mac Studio pricing. So I didn't want to go that crazy. So I settled on basically what I do. I think the Mac Mini M2 Pro chip is going to work well. It's got, like I said, the 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is twice of what I had. And so far, it's been great. I got it mounted under the desk. Takes up no room at all. It's got way more ports than that MacBook Air. I was limited to 2 USB-C ports. This one, way more stuff. And so far, no lag in the video. And it was like an instant thing. I plugged it in and opened up Ecamm just to see. And yeah, no lag whatsoever. Final Cut Pro works so much faster. I don't have to wait for those audio waves to load or anything like that. Hasn't crashed on me yet, knock on wood. So I definitely think that was a good investment. Got a great deal on it. I was torn between purchasing it through the EDU program on B&H Photo, but then I found we have a Micro Center here, and they had it for pretty much the same price. So I like seeing stuff in person and buying it in person versus ordering it online. So I went up there, talked to the guy about it and kind of what I needed it for. And like, he's like, yeah, this kind of mid-tier MacBook Mini with the M2 Pro chip is going to be great. It's going to be a hell of an upgrade over what I had. So I'm like, all right, cool. Let's just get that. It was significantly discounted on sale. So I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and get this. And so far, I've definitely been impressed. So if you're using a computer with, not so much RAM and stuff like that, and you're having issues, definitely looking into upgrading that computer might help. And it's definitely been a huge help with recording videos and everything like that. And one cool thing with all Apple products, if you probably know, is everything kind of transfers. So once it was kind of a pain in the butt to set up the MacBook Mini because there's no mouse or keyboard. So I had to figure out how to connect a keyboard and mouse to it, which was kind of a pain point. But once I got it done and synced and my Apple ID and everything uploaded, now when I use my MacBook Air, whatever I do on that, it pretty much saves and uploads to the Mac Mini. So if I do like an Excel project, it'll upload to the cloud and I can access it to where I was at in the MacBook Mini. And same thing with Final Cut Pro. Any project I do in Final Cut Pro on the laptop, I can open up the Mac Mini and everything is still there. So that's the one cool thing about Apple, is being able to have multiple devices and everything kind of sync together. Definitely a game changer. So I'll probably be doing a video on that. And now that I actually have the Mac Mini set up, I can do a full kind of comparison between the two, but that's kind of the bare bones of it. Definitely highly recommend. The Mac Minis, man, they're awesome. They're so sleek and small. If you're one of those minimalistic desk setups, they don't take a whole lot of room up. There's all sorts of different ways to mount it. Like I said, I got it mounted under the desk. You can mount it to a wall. You can mount it to the back of your monitor. And you got a powerful computer that is small and just sleek looking. All right, so moving on to the thing I am the most excited about. and that is what you're watching me on right now, is I did upgrade the camera. And I am like so excited about it, and I'm also getting used to it. It's way different than what I'm used to. So I have been using the Sony ZV-E10, which is a great camera. I'm glad I bought it. It's something good to learn on. It's very beginner friendly, especially with the auto programming. You can basically set it to auto and it does everything for you. And I paired it with the Sigma 16 millimeter 1.4 prime lens, and that's all I've really used on that camera. I came with a kit lens, but that thing was pretty much I haven't used it ever. And I really like the Sigma 1.4 because you get that nice blurry background. And that is an ASPC line camera, so it does have a 1.5 crop factor. So that 16 millimeter is actually more like an equivalent to like 37 millimeter on a full frame camera. So that was a kind of a huge thing I had to learn, is that whole crop factor thing. I was always watching YouTube videos of people like with the cameras like right up on them, like basically within reach. I'm like, how do they do that? If I have that ZV-E10 really close to me like that, you're going to be seeing just my face, and nobody wants to see my face that close up. So I'm like, how did they even, like, that's pretty much the widest lens that you want to put on there. You can get the Sony 11, but then that's what's going to start distorting stuff because it's like ultra wide at that point. And so I'm like, how are they doing this? Because when I set that up for the look of our main podcast, the ZV-E10 with the crop sensor, in order to get the wide shot for like 3 people around this table, the camera was 8 feet away from where we're sitting. And that's how I've been used to having a camera. So when I see people with these YouTube studio setups and the camera's like right behind the monitor they're sitting at, I'm like, how is that possible? Well, technically it's full frame. That's how they do it. And that's kind of what I upgraded to, is a full frame camera. My dream camera ever since I started getting into cameras, and even when I was looking at the ZV-E10, obviously I was like, man, the Sony a7 IV is like an awesome camera, and I saw great reviews, a bunch of people use it, but I'm like, that is a lot of money for me to spend as a beginner, not knowing anything about cameras. That camera is going to be way too advanced for me. So this was also the time where everything was shutting down with COVID, and Sony actually stopped making the Sony ZV-E10 for a while. So once I knew that's pretty much the camera I was going to start with, I bought the last one at Best Buy that they had, and it was just the kit. I couldn't buy the body only. So I ended up buying the last one at Best Buy before you couldn't buy them anymore. And I'm glad I did, because I got to learn more about cameras and the difference between APS-C and full frame and all this stuff that you need to know about cameras, really. So I'm glad that is a great entry-level camera. It's light, it's small, it is easy to use in a YouTube setup, and obviously gets great picture because we have that's 4K. As long as you have it connected to the capture card like I do, the Elgato 4K capture card, you get 4K footage, or you could just do like a regular HDMI and get like 1080, or maybe it's 720, but it looks like 1080. And it's great camera, but limiting on that. The autofocus was not good, at least for me. I don't know if it was the camera or maybe the lens or a combination of both. I made sure I had like eye autofocus, but it seemed like anytime that we were sitting here at a desk, and especially by myself, and I had a boom arm or microphone in front of me, it focused on that no matter what, until I had like my wife come in. And I'm like, all right, touch my face on the LCD screen so it focuses on my face. And that was a huge pain point with that camera, is the autofocus. A lot of times, especially before I started using Ecamm, I'd record a video thinking I was in focus and I wasn't. And then it's like, oh, well, that sucks. So the autofocus on this a7 IV, which I got, is way, way better. So yeah, so I ended up upgrading to the a7 IV, and I am so glad I did. I'm so excited to use this camera. I've used it on 2 different podcasts so far, and that's it. I haven't really taken any photos with it yet, so I'm so excited for this camera. Is pretty much my dream camera that I've wanted, other than like maybe an FX3. But what I like about the a7 IV is it is good at photos and also video, and so that's pretty much what I want to use it for. I want to be able to use it for the videos, but then also use it for thumbnails and stuff like that, or if I decide to go take photos elsewhere. So that was my kind of dream camera that I've always kept my eye on, always watching videos of people using it and being kind of jealous. I'm like, man, I wish I had one. Well, finally I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to upgrade to the camera. But then once you start doing research on cameras, you see some other ones that are out there. And then I really came across the FX30, which is a kind of a recent release from Sony. And I was really torn between the FX30 or the A7 IV. The main difference, obviously, being the FX30 is more, it's their cinema line camera, and it's more geared toward video than photos, but also it's the crop sensor. So it's the APS-C camera. So I would have been stuck with that 1.5 crop, which would have been fine because I was like, well, do I get that camera? It's cheaper than the A7 IV, and I already have this 60 mm lens. I already got lens, and obviously crop sensored lenses for the APS-C cameras are way cheaper than full frames. So I'm like, that'd be something really easy to invest in and have a bunch of different lenses for at a much less cost. But the whole cropped in sensor thing, I'm like, man, I really want to get the full frame. I want to be able to buy a lens and have it be at that focal length. And so I was really torn. And I went up to Best Buy, and just because, again, I'm one of those people that has to hold them in person, compare them in person if I can. And I was like, man, I almost pulled the trigger on the FX30, but I'm like, you know what? I've been wanting the A7 IV. That has been basically my dream camera. So I'm just going to go with that one. And so I did. And it was on the Black Friday sale. And I was torn again if I wanted to buy it from Best Buy, had them on sale, but B&H Photo had them on sale too for the same price. But with my EDU discount, I got an extra percentage off to where instead of being $2,500 for this camera, it ended up being like $2,000, which, you know, $500 off is a pretty good amount of money, especially for the A7 IV or full frame. When I was up at Best Buy, I asked the guy, I'm like, well, do you price match? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, sometimes, he's like, depending on who it is, we do. And I'm like, well, what about B&H Photo? And he had asked a couple people, and he's like, yeah, we do. So I pulled out my phone, and I, again, had EDU pricing on there. He didn't ask about that. I just said, here's the price I can get it for from B&H Photo, and they price match it. So not only did they price match the EDU pricing for the camera, but they also did it for the lens, which was a big discount. I think I saved almost $800 going that route. So it would have been the same if I would have bought it from B&H Photo, but I got to take it home that day, which was awesome. And then I always worry about stuff getting shipped and then obviously not being home or getting thrown around and having a camera that's been tossed around. I'm like, that would have sucked. So I'm like, I'd rather buy it in person and be able to see it and take it home that day. So since they price matched the EDU pricing, I'm like, sold, put it, wrap it up. And man, I was so excited. I was torn between two lenses. I was torn between the 24 mm f1.4 G Master, but that thing was like $1,200. But I ended up getting the 20 mm f1.8 G, which is pretty much the same thing, maybe just a step down. But man, this thing has been awesome. It's been a lot to get used to. I didn't realize how much of a difference there was between full frame and APS-C. Like, yeah, it's 1.5 times crop, but I've never used a full frame, so I didn't really know how much different that was an actual person using it. And I remember setting up the A7 IV for the first time, and I put it in the same spot I had the ZV-E10, and it was such a wide angle. Like the ZV-E10 like would get this pretty much almost this whole wall. And this again is 8 feet out from where I'm sitting right now. So I that's where I had the Sony ZV-E10, and I would be able to get 3 of us in focus. I would zoom in a little bit in Ecamm Live, but pretty much 8 feet out to get the 3 people around this table and a little bit on the sides of us, so we're not like scrunched in. The ZV-10 was 8 feet out. And I put this thing out there, and not only did it get the whole wall, but it also got half of the whole walls on the 2 sides of the room here. I'm like, wow, that is super wide. So that just goes to show you. Now I'm like, okay, now I know how people actually set up a camera and it's right in front of their monitors, and it doesn't look so cropped into their face. So now I have the Sony a7 IV like within arm's reach of where I'm sitting at now, and I actually like it better because it's easier to talk to the camera with it closer to you. Whereas 8 feet away, it's kind of harder to stay focused on the camera. So it was always like, yeah. And then obviously with the LCD screen, I couldn't see crap. Now with it within arm's reach, I can still see myself on the LCD screen until I'm in focus. And it's just awesome. And of course, now Elgato came out with their version of the teleprompter that looks awesome. So that might be something I get for this. So that way I could really see kind of a preview window or stuff I need to bring over right in front of me and look directly into the camera instead of having to look off screen a lot. That's what I do a lot on the main podcast. If I'm pulling something up, you always see me looking over here, whereas I can just control it from looking straight at you and it looks a lot better. You're not breaking eye contact. So this is probably out of anything I've gotten, I'm the most excited about the A7 IV. I currently have it on like the automatic settings right now just because I haven't had time to really mess around with manual settings. I know it's super easy to customize this thing, and the menu system is a lot easier than the ZVE10. I will say that. It's not that the menu system on the ZVE10 is terrible, but this one is a little bit more user friendly. The touchscreen's a lot better, and again, I'm just blown away by the autofocus of this camera. Like I could put something in front of it and it'll, if I cover my face, it'll focus on that and then focus back on me. Where at the ZVE10, man, it was always just trying to focus what was the closest to it. And a lot of times that was just blurring me out no matter what I did. And without having someone touch that screen for me, because I couldn't because it was so far away, it was hard to get stuff in focus. And now with this autofocus between the camera and this Sony lens, it's going to be so much easier, so much better. And I can't wait to start taking photos with this thing to see how they turn out. So it's going to be definitely a learning curve, learning how to program all the special buttons and do the manual settings, but definitely something I'm really looking forward to learning and messing with. I'm trying to figure out the perfect camera position. I had the Sony ZV-10 right where I liked it, had a good angle, and trying to figure this one out because it's like I have to have it really close to me and not show up because this is a black wall and I like the look of it. But then if it sees the two walls that are on either side, those are gray. So there's a noticeable difference and it kind of gets rid of the vibe. So right now I have the camera within arm's length and I am still zoomed in on Ecamm Live a little bit. So if I zoom out, this is how wide it is with just the camera right in front of me. So I don't want this wide of a thing, and I don't want the camera any closer to me. So I just zoom in a little bit in Ecamm and then call it good. So it's crazy how wide this is compared to the crop censored cameras from Sony. It's something I got to get used to, and placing the camera. It feels like to me that if my hands are like in front of me right now, my hands they look like they're huge, just the way the camera is. I think that's just something I have to get used to. It's obviously because the camera's closer and then my hands are like right in front of the lens at that point. So I think it's normal, but if you guys have noticed that, or if there's any workarounds, or if it's because of the lens or where I have the camera, let me know. But just trying to find the right height and slight angle to the camera I've just been playing around with. But again, I can't believe the difference of where I had the cameras. I took a picture and I'll need to set it up and take another one. It's just crazy how much further back I had to set that ZVE10 versus this one. It's so crazy to me. And since I have two Sony cameras now, I can pretty much use this one as the main A-roll shot and use the ZVE10 as like a secondary camera, especially on the podcast, just to get kind of like a different angle, kind of break it up. Because I do have the Stream Deck, so maybe hooking both of those up and switching between the two, or using that as an overhead camera if I need to. Because again, with the cell phone, the lighting kind of fluctuate between like cool and then soft white. Like it's always fluctuating and you kind of see it. And it's not that noticeable if you're not looking for it, but I notice it and it gets really annoying. So being able to have, and then also trying to match the color profile between a Sony camera and an iPhone camera is like impossible, even using LUTs and stuff like that. So that's been something I used to use for the main podcast, 2 cell phones and then the CVE10 as the main camera for the podcast, just for different angles. But it was so hard to match that color profile. And then when I switched over to obviously the cell phone camera, it would just be a completely different coloring, and it just kind of didn't look good. So I think having another Sony camera, it should, the color profile should match up pretty good. So having that as a secondary camera for the podcast will be real awesome, or it'll be easier to do like certain types of B-roll if I need to. So I'm definitely excited of having 2 Sony cameras to use. I think it's going to be a lot better than having to try to somewhat match the cell phone coloring, because it doesn't look good. But since I bought the Sony a7 IV, I'm definitely upgrading the tripod, and I actually just ordered one from B&H Photo that was on like the some deal that they were running. It's an actual video tripod instead of this one. It's a cheap one I bought off of Amazon. It's not very sturdy, like it is, but isn't. And so I'm like, this is a much more expensive camera. It's a little bit heavier. So I want a tripod I know that isn't going to be easily knocked over. Like I run into this tripod a couple times. I've ran into it actually when I had this ZVE10 on it and it fell over. And I'm like, oh my God, that's happened like a couple times. Luckily, nothing broke. I don't think there's like a little bit of a rattle now when I shake it, but I definitely don't want to drop this at all. I would be so mad. It's way more expensive between the lens and the camera. So I got a dedicated video camera that's got like the extra legs on the inside to actually, so it's like not going to fall over. And then it's got the pan and tilt that'll be really nice for some B-roll. Because that's another thing with the ZVE10. The stabilization is like garbage. Like trying to do like nice slow B-roll is really hard to do, even because I'm like a shaky person, I guess, because it was always shaky footage. So trying to adjust that in Final Cut Pro wasn't the best, and you could always tell. I know Sony has a program where you can upload that. I just never got around to doing that. But the stabilization is going to be way better with this lens and camera, so I can't wait to start doing some cool B-roll stuff. Should be a lot better. And then, of course, starting to look at more lenses for this one, which I need to not do. But then it's like, man, the freaking 85 millimeter focal length would be a cool one for some B-roll. But it's like, man, there's so many different options out there. You can get some that are relatively cheap, or obviously G Master, which is really expensive, but like supposedly the best. So trying to learn more about kind of doing the research. I would like to get one more lens for this, kind of a tighter one. I know 50 nifty is a good one to get. Thinking about that, but also probably some sort of 85 millimeter one, just for some cool B-roll, but that'll be later on down the road. But I'm excited to get the final stuff I'm waiting for, so I can do a new YouTube studio tour, so I can actually take you guys around and show you how I have it set up and everything I'm using. I'll try and throw some B-roll in this if I can and have time to, but I'll do a dedicated video on the new studio setup with the upgrades I've done, and then you'll be able to kind of see how it's changed from the initial one, because a lot has changed. I think the only thing that stayed the same is the Rodecaster Pro 2, but and some of the microphones and boom arms. One thing I want to figure out is these boom arms on this table, because when I have them, on the main podcast, they're in front of us, and then obviously it's nice and easy, but then the boom arm kind of takes up a lot of the shot, especially now with the full frame. I would like to find a way to have them come from the side, but I don't have anything for them to mount on. I can't mount them onto the side of the table just because of the frame. So I can't do tabletop because we're messing with whiskey and bottles and stuff like this, and it's definitely going to pick up that noise. And you got people on the podcast that kind of hit the table, and I don't want desktop stands for that. We use it for a third person, but sparingly. So if it's just me and Chris on the main podcast, I would like to find a way to kind of somehow boom these in different. So I got to figure that out. But other than that, after this next video that I make, not a whole lot should change. Knock on wood. but probably not, because last time I said that I ended up buying more stuff anyway. So I've been probably talking about gear for way too long now. If I haven't lost you or put you to sleep yet and you're still here, go ahead in the comment section, put if there was anything cool on sale that you guys got this year that is gonna like help your production that you're excited about. Maybe you were able to find your dream piece of gear. Let us know what that is down in the comment section as well. You can always ask questions. If I don't know the answer to, I'm sure somebody can answer that down in the comment section. That's the cool thing about YouTube versus like audio only platforms, is there is a comment section to kind of get a conversation going and stuff like that. Cause it's always nice to kind of hear about what people, got or are excited about, especially gear wise. So let us know down there. If you haven't been completely bored with this and kind of like this type of content, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button so you can be notified when I come out with more stuff like this. And also when I come out with that new studio tour setup. But if you want to see the original one, go ahead and check out this video up here. And then that way you'll know the old setup compared to the new one when that comes out. So again, thanks for watching. Hopefully you weren't too bored, and we'll catch you on the next episode.